Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could teach the gullible to never be so comfortable with lies they eat like comfort food? To disregard the bogus claims and pseudoscientific claims. Can you imagine just how much indeed the world would change? No more political predators playing on the populace with ilkas and plots to shift and kill metropolis. No more villains with the title in the Bible holding phony temper Bibles like the stuff they teach is vital. Imagine it was normal to have to prove a claim you make. And folks really feel ashamed expressing content that was fake. It's not to say we never make mistakes. It's just to say we go out of our way to show the evidence it takes.
Remain skeptical while you travel the road of reason. Stay strapped with logic and facts. That's what it is, yo. Keep reality intact to help the truth grow. Question every claim, especially the ones you believe in. Remain skeptical while you travel the road of reason.
Hola, es como está?
Word. That's our friend Tombstone, the Dead Man, friend of the show.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Very good artist. And he did that intro just for us.
Yes.
So it's still rapping all this time later, man. It's an awesome tune. Well, I'm Paul Sheehan, and
I'm Rick Wingrove.
That's Wick Wingrove. So,
Wick Wingrove. Close enough.
Wick Wingrove. Well, we're here with another exciting episode, Rick Wingrove.
Good start, yeah.
Of Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century. And we have some announcements, news, and some jokes and whatnot. Do you want to start with the news?
Jump right in with the news.
Sure.
Yeah, a couple of items. American Atheists this week announced the launch of their Atheist Voter Campaign. You can find this. There it is. You can find it on their website, atheists.org, and get involved, because the one thing that politicians understand, if they understand anything, well, other than money, is numbers. And they, so far, may not be aware how many of us there are out here. So American Atheists is urging everybody to sign up, to interact with your legislator, your elected officials, and let them know we're here, and we're mad as hell, and we're just not prone to take a lot of it much more. So
now, to be fair,
that would,
I know a few politicians out there that have troubles with numbers too.
Yeah, that's true.
It's all right.
Except when there has a dollar sign on it, bada bing.
Yeah, that one they got. The more zeros, the better.
But seriously, folks.
Yep.
The other thing, give me 1 second here.
Sure.
I apologize. Where'd it go?
Well, I'll tell you what, while you're doing that,
yeah.
I'm going to remind our viewers that Fairfax Public Access is continuing to move towards donations through their website. I would encourage people to go to the Fairfax Public Access website. The framework is in place. There's a dead link on there right now, but they're integrating that into the system. So please, check out Fairfax Public Access's website. There is instructions, or excuse me, I should say there are instructions on that website for how to call in your donation. So there's no excuse. It's as simple as picking up the phone, calling it in. Make sure that you let them know you're making the donation in the name of Road to Reason. Also, for those of our viewers that are not aware, I am on the AV committee for Reason Rally 2. I will...
also leading up to the 2016 election.
That's right. That is correct. So I will be bringing you news as I'm permitted to give it to you from the Board of Reason Rally. But we will be doing...
But it's coming.
It is coming.
So be there or be square.
So I will be doing a lot of exciting things. And Steve Shives was apparently such a huge hit on our show, he will be returning in the next month as a co-host, or as a guest host.
Right.
So he'll be coming on to guest host. So you have more news, right, Rick?
Oh, just a couple of fun items here about marriage equality. For instance, in the state of South Carolina decided they were not going to abide by the Supreme Court and a judge's order. They continued to refuse to issue licenses, and about 10 minutes later, a judge told them they had to do it, and they had to pay legal fees on it. So the state attorney general ended up having to, their office has to pay $135,000 in fees to the other side. Totally self-inflicted wound. They didn't have to do it. The writing was on the wall. Supreme Court decision, a judge's order, and they just decided to ignore that and go forward. The bad part of this is that it's not actually the attorney general who's going to have to pay this out of his pocket. It's going to be the taxpayers of North Carolina.
Well, how appropriate, being that today's show is about taxation of churches and the abuse of some religions, and whether they really deserve their tax status, and individuals that have abused that and have gone to prison.
Well, it has to do with religious exemption too. The other story here is, of course, this woman in, where was she? Well, you've seen her on TV. The woman who refused to issue a marriage license to a couple. She also appealed the decision and was told directly it was given a direct order by a judge, you have to do this. She has again declined to do this and is going to be facing contempt. Now the interesting thing about this is, or what they seem to miss on this is, it is not the person who issues a marriage license, it is the state that issues a marriage license. So here is a woman who has decided with her religious exemption that she doesn't have to do that. She does not have to abide by the law of the land or apply the privileges of the state to individuals that if it's against her religious, her deeply held religious beliefs.
Personally religious.
So she's taking the position that her personal beliefs on this trump state and federal law, and she just doesn't have to do it. I say she should be fired by close of business last week.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting. This is a public official.
Yeah.
This is a public official who is got a responsibility to treat all citizens equally under the law. And the law has now interpreted that gay rights have the same rights as everyone else.
Absolutely.
I'm a big believer. If you don't believe in it, you're free to resign your position.
Absolutely.
You go work for some private organization that preaches whatever it preaches, but as long as you're doing a public job in a public space with public tax dollars, with our court systems and our legislative branches that have ruled that gay rights gay people have a right to be married, then you need to do your job.
Right.
If everybody in this country got an exemption because something was deeply, profoundly some objectionable to them. Can you imagine doctors that don't want to treat black people, or men who think that women don't deserve the same level of equality in the workplace?
Well, if history teaches us anything, it is that some people out there believe that it is their deeply held religious belief that they have the right to kill people who do not agree with them. That goes on this planet to this day. It has gone on historically in the majority religion in this country.
Yeah.
So to say that can't happen, it's just that's not
right.
happening. We're not getting a lot of Christian genocide in this country these days, but it is historically something that has happened. And
it can happen if we don't rein it in, and there is a history with it. I mean, there was a time where things like that did happen. And the idea is the culture moving one way or is it moving another? And it doesn't have to get to a point where they're killing people.
It's such a slippery slope. What is a deeply held conviction? Something you say it is, whatever you say it is, and just those claims are just alarmingly consistently
if you're being paid
in nature.
If your job is paying you with my tax dollars, I want you to treat everybody equally. I want you to treat everyone fairly.
But this woman's job is to follow the laws of the state and apply the policies.
Yep, and that's the way it should be.
She's not doing it, she needs to be gone.
So you got more news?
That's it for me.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, I have a good joke. Okay.
That remains to be seen.
All right. There's two cannibals, and they're eating an atheist. Mm-hmm. And one cannibal turns to the other and he says, "Can you believe how this guy tastes?"
Yeah,
that's cute.
That was a good one, Paul.
Yeah, that's cute. That is cute. You have to admit, that was funny. Well, we have a skeptical or free thinker of the week. This week it's actually going to go to a foundation. It's the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And this is another example where on this show, we don't trump on people's religious rights. We don't trump on their right to believe whatever they want to believe. But again, going back to a separation of church and state and respecting other people's beliefs, the state should not be in the business of enforcing their individual religious ideology. Yeah. And the Freedom from Religion Foundation is now filing a lawsuit against Smith County Court Judge Randall Rogers. Why are they doing this? This judge out in Texas basically was presiding over a case of domestic violence where an individual had punched the ex-boyfriend of his current fiancée. The judge basically said you can do 30 days in jail or 2 years in probation, and you have to get married. And so the judge basically imposed marriage as a part of a sentence on this individual.
As a sentence, that's highly ironic.
But he didn't leave it at that. He made the guy write religious scriptures every day. So you know that this mandated religious marriage is what this is. This is not. This was not just a judge who just thought that marriage would solve this guy's problem. There's a religious element to it.
How many constitutional principles does that just dump all over?
Well, he made the
mandated speech. Is mandated speech free speech?
Yes. So this judge has not only made this guy get married as a part of his jail sentence, or not his jail sentence, but a part of his sentence, he's also making him write a Bible verse out of Proverbs 26:27. 25 times a day he has to write this. And if a man digs a pit, he will fall into it. So
it sounds like a job for copy and paste.
But this is again, who's paying this judge?
Yeah, and how does he constitutionally back up mandated religious behavior?
Well, what if this couple was Buddhist or Muslim or Hindu, or what if they were atheists?
Forbid.
God forbid. I mean, would they in fact only have the option of going to jail?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Would he respect their religious beliefs and impose a sentence out of their book?
Well, it would appear that this judge has an extreme Christian agenda and is again a functionary of the state using his state position to impose religion.
And I'm looking at this article, and I don't know anything about this judge, but the fact that he's given a choice here tells me that this judge probably on some level is a fair guy. He probably views the world in an and/or situation. The problem that I have is that he is imposing his beliefs on other people in that manner. So do I have a problem with a judge who is not seeing things in black and white? No. I have a problem with that his white is his personal belief. It's not a case of 30 days in jail or community service, something that the entire community benefits from. So it's very unfortunate.
Well, I'll say this about judges. Clearly, many judges are idiots. It's just that simple.
Okay. And with those wise words.
And I say that from personal experience. Many judges, not all, but some are idiots.
So, some are. And I'd have to say, whatever this guy is overall, he may be a decent guy overall. This was an idiotic move because he had to have known that the Freedom from Religion Foundation was going to file suit. And then we got to get to our break, but before we do, this is the reason why they got Freethinker, is that they are suing even though they were not a direct party to this. They were so affronted by this judge's behavior. And this means they're probably not going to win in court because they probably don't have standing because they weren't the victims or representative of the victims. But they're doing this. Hey, if a judge can do it on moral principle, then they should be able to sue on moral principle. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to our break. And when we come back, we have Robert Baty on, and we're going to talk about tax time.
Okay.
Good.
Homemade noodles. Marty, stop it. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. It reminds me. I've been thinking maybe we should try a new form of birth control. I heard about this one. It's called the IUD, intrauterine device. Or we could try the patch on your arm. Actually, I think that one goes on your butt.
Bedsider.org has birth control information and a lot more. And it's...
What do you think then? Arm or the butt?
There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week, the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube, and remember to watch Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century, or there'll be hell to pay.
You want to know something really liberating about critical thinking? It allows you to drop all your pretenses. As a critical thinker, there's a recognition that there are no more powerful words in the English language than "I don't know." It's pretty awesome, actually. Admitting you don't know shouldn't be viewed as an admission of weakness or insecurity. It's the only place where real learning and growth begin. Did you ever wonder what it is about being a child that makes life so much fun? What is it that kids have that we lose as we grow up? It's their sense of wonder and delight at discovering things. They know they don't know, and they can't wait to find out. They pester everyone with questions because they want to know everything. Unfortunately, as we get older, that sense of wonder pretty much gets beaten out of us. Socially, we're taught by our peers almost as soon as we start making friends that ignorance is not bliss. The name-calling, the ridicule, and being laughed at soon convince us that it's better to just make things up instead of admitting that we don't know. We get into this habit and pretty soon can even convince ourselves that we're experts in areas we know almost nothing about. We walk around wearing this pretense of knowledge like body armor, but really it's as thin as tissue paper because we know anyone, anywhere could find out what a fraud we are at any moment. Do you like living like that? Because I don't. And here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with not knowing. The truth is that saying "I don't know" is not any indication that you're a moron or lacking in any kind of intelligence. It just means you never learned or can't remember something. We are born not knowing, and it's the quest for knowledge and experience that keeps life fresh and keeps us alive. Some of the most miserable, hateful, and spiteful people I've ever known have been the ones who thought they knew exactly what was going on and didn't have anything more to learn. Don't try to tell them anything, they've got it all figured out. Those aren't the people who are changing the world for the better. They aren't even trying. It's those who want to learn, who want to discover, and want to grow. Those are the people upon whom we all depend to make the next big discoveries and take the next leap forward. They are the scientists, the inventors, the philosophers, and the leaders who can take our species to the next level in our evolution. We all have it in us to learn and grow. It starts with an honest appraisal of what we do know, what we are certain of, and being strong enough to admit that we have some more learning to do. I love critical thinking for teaching me this. I can't wait to learn more.
Welcome back. We are now joined by Robert Baty, who worked for the Internal Revenue Service and who is challenging Kent Hovind to a debate. Robert, welcome to Road to Reason. We are not able to hear Robert in the studio.
So, no.
All right, hang on, Robert. We're gonna bring you on in a second as soon as we get that audio issue worked out. But basically,
You got any more jokes?
yeah. So, but it was working fine just a minute ago. So I don't know.
Yeah, but somebody fixed it.
Yeah, somebody fixed the problem. We had it.
That window popped up on the screen. I said, "What's that?" She,
What's that?
They're fixing it.
Let's fix it till it's broke.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing he's done. Well, basically, I hear a feed coming in. Robert?
Yes.
Oh, there he is. Hey, all right. We got you now, Robert.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to Road to Reason.
Glad to be here.
Good. Glad to have you. So,
Curious that you
go ahead.
Your advertising time just now included Richard Dawkins, whom Kent Hovind is making fun of for not debating him while he refuses to debate me.
Don't you like that?
More irony. Or hypocrisy, whichever.
Yeah, it's like let him earn those debates, you know?
Right.
It's like he's such a dishonest character, I think.
Now his son Eric would be happy to debate anybody.
Yeah.
He thought it would help.
And his son actually lost a debate like to an 8-year-old. Did you ever see that footage?
I saw that one.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
That was a lot of fun.
So Robert, you work for the Internal Revenue Service. I'd like to start a little background on this, let the viewers know a little bit about you and about why you want to debate Kent Hovind.
Okay. I'm about 10 years out from my IRS service, having retired in 2005. I started in 1973 as an auditor, auditing mostly individuals and a few small businesses. Got a little more accounting to go with my bachelor's degree, and moved up to the appeals office and was an appeals officer for the last 20 years or so of my career.
And when you were we're going to talk about this later, you saw a lot of things throughout the years. You saw like when Scientology was breaking into offices, you were in during that time. You've probably seen a number of things with religions going on, so we're going to get into that a little bit later. But walking away from the IRS, why do you think you're in a good position to debate Kent over his tax abuse that he was involved in? What is it that was convicted of, and what is he protesting that you want to tackle?
Well, Kent and I are about the same age, so we grew up together and went different paths in different parts of the country. He claims to be a theist, I claim to be a theist. He claims to be a Baptist, I claim to be a Christian. He's got a tax issue. I worked in the tax business, and I've had certain religious interests and tax interests as long as Kent Hovind has. And Kent, in recent years, has insisted on promoting a false narrative regarding his activities regarding that. And despite my efforts, which, depending on who you talk to, have been extensive, he refuses to take heed. His people refuse to take heed and insist on promoting the false narrative. It's not really that complicated if you have the interest and time to look at it. And yet, even in his most recent videos, he's proclaiming that his case is just exactly like the cases popularized by the media involving structuring and IRS enforcement policies and efforts, and that is simply false. His case is factually and legally distinguishable from what's been in the media.
So what would you say is the crux of his problem? Like, what brought him down?
He's apart from the religious angle he uses, he's a common enough tax cheat. He has gone publicly claiming he never filed income tax returns, and that seems to be true. He doesn't report his income, and he got into structuring and the employment tax issue, and he's done everything a good sovereign citizen would do to thwart the IRS enforcement efforts, and he needs it to be called to account in stronger terms. The 9 years he spent in jail recently in federal custody doesn't seem to have made a believer out of him, and he seems intent on pursuing that course.
Just a common tax cheat. That's kind of funny, but he's of course proclaiming persecution because of his religion or something.
Yeah, he's claiming that, and he's got people that have like done protests in the streets for him with like their little "Free Kent Hovind" signs and stuff like that. And so it seems like he's also been able, Robert, to garner some support within his community, that he's somehow a victim. And it seems like in my pre-interview discussion with you, that's one of the things you seem to be really bothered by, was the fact that this guy's trying to rewrite what actually happened.
Well, there is a problem in agreeing on what the record actually shows. It's interesting that you mentioned support in the community, because one of the big issues during his recent legal proceedings is the fact that hardly anybody in Pensacola will publicly come out and support him. Most of his support is from his base around the world, and they have to ship in people to Pensacola to mount those protests and demonstrations and fill the courtroom. Most of the people, from all indications, in Pensacola would just as soon he moved somewhere else.
Now, I know that he had his old dinosaur land there as well, and if I'm not mistaken, that also ran into some tax issues. Is that not correct, that he was using that as a shelter of some type?
Well, when he was convicted back in 2006 of the structuring and employment tax and obstruction charges, related to the structuring charges was the imposition of a fine or a penalty, which I think typically can be up to and equal to the amount of money you structured. So they determined he structured $400,000 or so in monies, and so imposed a penalty of that. And since he couldn't write the check or wouldn't write the check at that time, they substituted the property and forfeited the property to the government in exchange for that $400,000 plus penalty for structuring. And they've been selling it off piece by piece, much of it having been bought back by Eric and the other Hovind family members.
I'm sure through dedicated donations.
Probably.
Yeah.
So the U.S. government owned a
part of dinosaur land?
A science denial dinosaur land for a while. That's great.
Now he, if I'm not mistaken, Kent is basically kind of still doing the tax, but he's being smarter about not paying his taxes. We talked about like how a lot of these guys, I know like Peter Popov and some of these people in the past, once they kind of get pulled out and the finger pointed, they learn how to play the game. What are some of the things that Kent's doing now that concern you?
Well, I think for the most part, he's gone underground. He used to, when he first got hooked up with Rudy Davis, the YouTuber who promoted his cause extensively, argued that there should be full disclosure, tell the whole world about him and all the details about what's going on with Kent Hovind. And now that he's out and in supervised release for 3 years, it appears to me he's gone underground and doesn't really want people to know what he's doing. His friend Ernie Land supposedly is in the process of or has set up some corporations to funnel the money and activities through and make like they're being conventionally compliant with the tax laws, which they may be. We don't really know the details. I don't. I haven't heard anybody else talk as if they knew. So there's a lot going on now that Kent doesn't talk about. I think he's resigned to doing what he's going to do tax-wise under the cloak of darkness, and publicly he's going to be preaching his thing and saying very little about his legal problems, even though he has pledged to spend the rest of his life trying to overturn his 2006 conviction.
You know, I noticed that it's like Scientology, which we're going to talk a little bit about with like L. Ron Hubbard and David Miscavige, and there's people like, we were just talking about, I forget the other guy's name, but every time they get in trouble, they figure out, if I have a buffer, someone between me and the money, and if I make myself the head of the organization and I'm living off of stipend and it's not directly going in my account, then I can't be held accountable for it. What I found amazing, though, from what we're talking about, Robert, is that so much of the stuff that goes on with these churches is that the only thing that, to my knowledge, and I may be wrong on this, is they have to file a 990, which is a very basic form that says how much money the organization took in, how much it put out. They're not being taxed on it, so it just doesn't seem like there was that much of an effort for the guy to report this income.
Well, churches are exempt from filing that Form 990. The FFRF, which you mentioned earlier, had a separate lawsuit over that issue, but they lost it. And so churches enjoy an exemption from filing Form 990s, but that remains a political issue for those so inclined. And there's been a lot of talk and discussion about whether that's appropriate, particularly when you consider so many churches now are $1 million operations without accountability. some liability for filing Form 990s would seem appropriate to get some accountability. In Kent's case, he likes to claim, and his people like to claim, he was operating as a church. He was not. Alternatively, he likes to claim he's operating as a ministry. He was not as a matter of law or under the law. That's just a label he likes to put on his operations in order to invoke God and an exemption from civil law.
Yeah, they don't have enough privileges to start with. Total tax exemption on all their income, cash businesses, they have to file no forms, tax breaks on parsonages, and a hundred other things, advantages they get. But it's not enough. They still, Kent Hovind and others, have found reason basically to cheat.
So let me back up a step, Robert. What exactly was it that was the linchpin in Kent Hovind's case that sent him to prison? Like what is it that he did? If I was going to be some corrupt guy just like Kent, that I should make sure I don't do?
From my perspective, the linchpin is the fact he was making millions of dollars in personal income and not reporting it. And related to that was the structuring charge. And the structuring, they talk about these days, the structuring for the IRS or the government to be more forceful in dealing with should be related to some criminal activity. Well, in Kent's case, there was independent criminal activity. He was evading his personal income tax responsibilities as well as paying his employees in cash and evading employment tax responsibilities. So you can count either one of those two as linchpins, the employment tax or the income tax. The structuring is merely a mechanism he used to affect his tax evasion. And the structuring law was made just for those kind of people, despite Kent's claim otherwise.
And we had talked about how religions get exemptions for things for employees, so they don't have to pay living wages, they're not paying taxes on that. Like for instance, Scientology has its Sea Org, where they basically pay these people $50 a week. And, you know, I think most people, if I'm not mistaken, Robert, when they think about a religious worker, they think about like a nun or a Jesuit priest or, you know, a minister going to Africa and helping give vaccinations or something like that. They're not thinking about something you pointed out to me was somebody could be a basketball coach for the church's, you know, youth league or something, and that person they don't have to pay taxes on it. Is that correct?
Close enough.
Close enough.
One can get bogged down as much as they like in that issue. I appreciate you mentioning the basketball coaches because that's one of my pet peeves. And that I use as an example to a much bigger problem. You know, 100 years ago, tax-free housing for a minister might not have been that big a deal. Nobody got too worked up about it. But over time, you realize churches are growing. Some churches will ordain anybody and everybody, and so in the eyes of the law, everybody gets paid by the church, can have the tax exemptions, and some religions get short-ended there. You know, Jews, rabbis and cantors can have the tax benefits, but not the normal Jew that comes in and coaches basketball. But the basketball coach at Pepperdine University can register as a minister and claim hefty tax-free housing allowance. And that should irritate a lot of people, but apparently not enough yet to do anything about it, despite the recent litigation and the recent political mumbling about it. Nothing's been done about it.
You know, the parsonage thing is a really great example of the abuse that's going on, because when I was a kid and my mom was having me in a Baptist church in West Texas, you know, the preacher lived in a little house provided by the church. It was, you know, maybe 1,000 square feet or something. It was a nothing. But if you look around at God, who are we talking about?
Joel
Osteen or Kenneth Copeland.
Yeah.
Joel Osteen, his pictures of his house have been going around Facebook and the internet. Well, there it is on the screen. Monster house. Who knows how many square feet, and a swimming pool. Sweet little parsonage. And I'm familiar with the one of Kenneth Copeland, which is northwest of Fort Worth on lake shore of Eagle Mountain Lake. And I have friends who live on that lake, and I've been in a boat. We've gone around the corner there, and I've gotten pictures of his house. It's a triple boat house he has, covered parking for 3 boats, tennis courts, amazing house, amazing landscaping, and it's on the grounds of an old World War II airstrip, which he leases from the state of Texas for a pittance. And so it's gone beyond providing a little housing for a preacher.
Right.
These are multi-million-dollar pieces of property on which they pay no taxes.
Well, it seems to me like there's a definite disconnect in historically what people think of churches. Like, you know, the church is it's like a bastion of the community. It does good in the community, and what we have with these televangelists, which are these just like huge, monstrous kind of tentacles. I guess the question is, how does the law distinguish between these two people? And is there anything currently, Robert, that distinguishes between, you know, the traditional American image of a hardworking small church versus a mega church? And if there isn't, what obstacles do you think people are going to have to face to basically kind of make change there?
I think the administration of the law and the law itself has not kept up with the evolving cultural landscape. And I think this, in part, is reflective in Senator Grassley's highly touted investigation of the $1 Million Ministries. He spent years looking into those $1 Million Ministries and uncovering evidence of just what we've been talking about. How Paul and Jan Crouch could hire all kinds of people to run their television stations, ordain them, and give them tax-free money, for instance. And Grassley came up with the details as to the abuses of the law in those areas. And instead of acting on it, Grassley farmed out thinking about it any further to his religious friends. And his religious friends got back to him and said, you keep your hands off Internal Revenue Code Section 107, which allows for that tax-free housing benefit to ministers. Whether it's $1,000 or $1 million, you don't touch that benefit. And Grassley said, okay.
Yeah, it's funny you should bring up Grassley, because about a dozen years ago, when I did take these pictures and everything of Kenneth Copeland's house, I delivered those to Senator Grassley, Congressman Grassley. I delivered those to his office in a nice package and everything with a lot of other supporting information, and found out shortly thereafter that Grassley had basically just dropped it. Yeah. It was going nowhere.
Now, Robert, I want to ask you. You identify as a Christian. Why is this? I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking only atheists support a separation of church and state. That only we care about the issue of the influence of religion and politics, but these are important issues to you as well. I was wondering maybe why you could explain to the audience why it's you feel that this is a valued discussion.
Well, I got into it, started getting into it deeper when I was working for the IRS, and found out, or became impressed with some of the preaching in my own church. And believed it and still believe it, but found out that even in my own church, we had people compromising our principles and abusing the tax laws. My own people, so to speak, are the ones down in Abilene Christian University now who ran into tax trouble over who could get tax-free income. And they ultimately wound up bringing on George Bush Sr. and Omar Burleson, another Texas politician, to put the squeeze on the IRS and get them off the hook. so that their employees could register as ministers and have tax-free income. Contrary to the facts, contrary to the law, and yet they were flexing that political muscle at the highest level of the IRS, the company I worked for, and they did it successfully, compromising the law, my church, the principle of separation of church and state, because they got the government to recognize these private enterprises like Abilene Christian University as an integral agency of the church. And it's not. As a matter of law or a matter of theology, it is not an integral agency of the church, but they had to declare it such so they could give all their employees who wanted to sign up for it tax-free income. And if you call them today and ask people in the know at those institutions, are you an agency of the church? They'll tell you, no, we're not. Not in law, not in fact, and not in theology. And that's been an issue in the church that I'm a member of for years and decades and decades. And yet that was drilled into me as a member of the church. And then I found out my own church members were compromising that for a few dollars.
Yeah.
Robert, it just seems like there's no appetite at the IRS to do any hard enforcement on any of these. I know another thing I did was I sent some videos and things to the IRS in a formal complaint about 15 or 16 years ago of Jerry Falwell flagrantly politicking from the pulpit, and never even got so much of it as acknowledgement from the IRS that they'd received anything. So there just doesn't seem to be any enforcement going on in that arena.
Well, it's hard sometimes. You should have probably got an acknowledgement, but it's difficult to tell whether it does any good because those are private matters, and unless there's some later public case made of it, you won't know what they've done with it. And certainly anymore, the politicking by churches has become so public, and there's so much of it, it would be hard to tell. And the IRS has been under so much scrutiny and limitations and budget cuts, that's not a big enforcement area. And the FFRF tried to do something about that. They worked out an agreement and settled their case with the IRS, that the IRS, we can still do it, but, we got limitations and so forth. And people on both sides of that, the religious people complained that the FFRF got an agreement, settled the case, and the other side still claims the government's not doing enough. And so,
well, you had talked.
Come this next election, we'll see if there's any change.
You have something, Rick?
No, I was just going to say, in the stuff that I sent to the IRS was Falwell just brazenly taunting the IRS to do anything about it. Well, and of course, nothing was done.
Which is interesting because then you got the other side where you had Scientology literally was breaking into their offices, was trying to blackmail IRS agents, suing individual IRS agents, right, spying on them as individuals. And ultimately, I know that there's this recent documentary came out, and there's like this famous picture where they're all on camera shaking the hands and celebrating with the IRS agents, right, when they basically sued them into peace.
You're talking about Going Clear?
Going Clear.
Yeah, that's actually playing on HBO today.
There you go.
Actually, it's back making the... right.
And Robert was in during that time, and I was wondering, Robert, what were some of the stories that you heard, and what was your thoughts when the IRS made peace with Scientology?
Well, I wasn't an expert then, and I'm not now, and not that well informed, although I do recall at the time not thinking the agreement was necessarily the right way to go. And one of the common complaints is that after all the years and years of fussing and fighting and the litigation, the IRS won a particular issue in court. I think it went to the Supreme Court. And then as part of the settlement, when the Scientologists, the IRS said, yeah, we won that, but we're going to give it up as part of the deal. I think it's most unfortunate that agreement was reached There should have been a better way. I think over time, the IRS has not given enough attention to what Scientology is doing and should revisit the whole agreement and how to deal with Scientology and what it does when it comes to federal tax implications.
Well, they totally intimidated the IRS. I believe they filed over 1,000 lawsuits in a,
they went after
in a
1,000
1 week
individuals.
period. Yeah, and the IRS just humiliatingly just bailed.
Well, I think that speaks volumes of the power religions have in influencing our government institutions. Now, obviously maybe this is a bit stereotypical, Robert, but I think a lot of people, when they think IRS, think of this government agency with a big club, and that may be completely, just not correct, but the reality is that that's an institution you do not want to get into a conflict with, as Kent Hovind found out.
Right.
But when a religion can literally do something publicly, like beat the IRS into submission, it says to me that our institutions are at risk.
Yeah, that was a sad and embarrassing episode, I think, for the IRS.
So I have to ask you, Robert, have you reached out directly to Kent Hovind to debate him? Have you sent this guy an email? Have you what have you done to make him aware you want to take him on? And have you heard from him at all?
I haven't heard from him directly, and most people say he's not going to debate you. I have no doubt that he is aware of my efforts to debate him or any champion he wants to send out. In fact, a couple of years ago, when he was still in prison, his people came to me and set up a email exchange through his prison email account. And we had a brief exchange of about 20 total messages. And when I started pressing him to deal with his legal problems, he cut and ran. And he's been running ever since. He does not want to talk about his legal problems with somebody that's informed and knowledgeable and will be adversarial regarding his factual claims and legal claims. I think he knows he's wrong. He knows he's guilty. He doesn't want to admit it. And even in a recent video, he took note of the fact that there are so many ministries out there that when their leaders get caught in criminal activity, the ministry suffers. And so he seemed to be dearly afraid that if he admitted his guilt, it would not bode well for his fundraising efforts.
Yeah, that does seem to be a theme. And I guess, what was his name? Jim Baker, he admitted, and he's crying, and I guess maybe it helped him a little bit. But these days, it just doesn't seem to pay to admit you're wrong. Especially with people like Kent, who seem to be wrong on almost everything he talks about.
Pretty much everything, yeah.
So,
Kent, I think, does have an advantage now in that, as far as I can tell, his legal issues are over. And if he successfully serves out his supervised release, he's out of it. And if he keeps his hands clean, that's fine. So the public relations advantage is all his. He can promote his false narrative and avoid informed adversaries and milk his base for all they're worth.
Yeah. It's definitely not in his interest to get into a debate. No wound that he's been rubbing stuff on.
Not to his advantage to call this up in public, in a public display, to debate it.
Well, maybe if people are honest that do debate him, they'll always make it a part of whatever discussion. Because I think that's an important thing, is there's an accountability. I mean, whether I agree with this guy or not, he claims to be preaching morality, and thinking that you're exempt from the same laws that govern everyone else does not appear to be moral.
That's a whole show in itself.
It's a whole show into itself. But so you and I were talking in the pre-interview, Robert, about, okay, so we've got laws on the books that could be enforced, but there seem to be two obstacles from the way I interpreted it. You may not have interpreted it this way or have a different explanation of it. Problem number one was the desire and will to do something about it, because sometimes in the IRS they are answering to people above them that have political interest. The second thing that I came away from our discussion is that while there are laws on the books, there are also obstacles that have been put in place to keep the IRS from actually executing its duties. Am I off on either of those? Am I missing something there?
Fair enough. Churches enjoy special rules regarding audits and investigations. That's the first hurdle. Even if you wanted to audit a church, there's a whole series of special things you have to do to get approval, and then how to handle the investigation. And they don't catch all the speeders. They don't catch all the bank robbers. And so they don't catch all the tax cheats. Limited resources. They have to pick and choose wisely, if I can refer to them as being wise, which cases to pursue. So if you get bold preachers, they can outnumber the IRS real quick. Just have 10,000 of them recommend that they not vote for Hillary Clinton, and see how much coverage that gets from the IRS. Probably very little.
So we were talking about too, like, you know, what's a practical way to rein in some of this stuff, and we're talking about it's not very practical to try to take away a tax status from a church, because the hurdles you face are very difficult. But if they're preaching from the pulpit, it might be easier to go down and just hand them a citation for that individual violation. But even there, you were suggesting that the IRS has its hands tied, that there's hurdles and things they have to go through. It's not as simple as just showing up and handing them a fine. Am I correct in that?
Right, it would take some legislative change, but just like the highway patrolman can pull you over and give you a ticket, they ought to make it that way, so that if a preacher gets up Sunday morning and tells you to vote for Rick Perry come election day, then that's pretty easy to document. And if you have the documentation, you catch him on radar, write him a ticket Monday morning and give him his fine and let him show up in court and pay it or contest it.
But we have a way to go to get there, is what you're telling us.
A long way off. I don't know we'll ever get there.
What do you think would be a good starting point? Like, what recommendations do you have as someone that was in the IRS that would be effective in changing public policy?
I spent maybe 30 years trying to get them to repeal Internal Revenue Code Section 107 on the housing allowance, or at least change the rule that would not allow the basketball ministers the benefit. And I was disappointed for all my effort. It didn't make much progress. It's still on the books. So I'm not the one to ask how to get them to rein in the electioneering by churches. Some people think you ought to revoke that Johnson Amendment, which is where the limitation comes from, and let them electioneer. So you got two sides in the political arena. Which side might ultimately win, I don't know.
That would seem like just an unimaginable increase in their immunity from any constraints in politics or morality or anything else, and yet still on our tax dollar.
Yeah, it's definitely...
We're paying the freight for everything they do.
Yeah, I know, like Joel Osteen, one of his big things right now is he preaches that if you give him money, God will reward you with twice-fold return. I'd like to see that twice-fold being taxed, you know? It's like whatever. But...
Jim Baker got in trouble for promising things in multiples like that.
Yes, he did. Yeah, it's I don't know what you're going to do with these guys.
I hear Jim Baker is back in business, has been for a long time as well, and Kent Hovind might enjoy the same renewed prosperity once he gets his business back up and operating.
Jimmy Swaggart never left the business after he got caught in a hotel.
Well, if Kent Hovind actually brings at least rides to his next dinosaur land, it'd be a little more popular, because that thing was pretty shabby looking as it was.
Well, it was.
So you were talking before about how, and Scientology, you know, again, I know you're not an expert on Scientology, but this is the connection that I'm making, is they have front groups like Narconon, which is their old drug detox. They have their Way to Happiness organization, which is their secular moral code. Mm-hmm. They claim publicly that all these things are secular. But for tax exemption purposes, the IRS also reined in all these as religious exemption. And you're saying that if an organization is a church, but it also has a group that it calls a secular front, then in theory that group should be taxed as a private business, or at least have a separate 501c that is separate for some other charity?
Well, that gets deeper into the law, but you're right. If you just had your corner church, they're pretty easy to identify in what they do. But so many of these $1 million, $1 billion operations, it's not just that organization or that church. They have 15, 20, 100 maybe separate entities that they use to operate through, and some of them may be closely enough related to the church to enjoy the benefits. Whether that's a good idea or not is debatable, and others may be separated enough that they don't enjoy those benefits. That's the problem related to the basketball minister, again, at places like Pepperdine University. Is Pepperdine University closely enough allied with a church so that its employees can register as ministers and be tax exempt on part of their income? I don't think so, but Bush and Burleson got the deal done with the IRS, and so they can be. And preachers in the church still preach it otherwise, while the government and Pepperdine have a special deal going. It's supposed to be top secret. Not so much so, but you have a apparent gross hypocrisy between what the people in the pew are being taught and what the higher-ups are doing with the federal government and different institutions that church people operate. Just because a church person is operating a business doesn't make it an agency of the church. And I think that's part of the bigger problem that has to be worked out.
Gross hypocrisy.
Gross hypocrisy. It sounds like there's a lot of education going on, that needs to be going on here in this subject.
By the way, side note, president of Pepperdine, don't know if it still is, but it used to be Ken Starr, if I'm not mistaken.
He became a Baptist and went to Baylor, I think it is.
Oh, he's at Baylor now? Okay.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are down to our last minute, or actually our last 45 seconds for our credits roll, and I want to thank you very much, Robert, for coming on Road to Reason. It was a great discussion. Perhaps we can have you on again in the future. If Kent finds himself back in prison, we certainly would love to have your take on it.
That'd be great.
Thank you very much. Kent's co-conspirator is due for sentencing this next Friday.
And just for the record, we would be happy to host the debate here on Road to Reason for the entire viewing world. If he ever bites, you certainly have an invitation to do it here, should you choose to do so.
Okay.
Thank you. Glad to have the venue.
Wrap it up here.
And we'll see you all next week on Road to Reason, a Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century. And until then, stay skeptical. And as Rick will tell you, read your Bible.
Read your Bible.